there is sometimes what I would call the R&D delusion that we can do it ourselves. That gosh, why are these other folks, slowing us down if they would just listen to us? But I think that what I've learned over the decades now is that that's also foolhardy in that there is so much technical depth, there's so much business understanding, there's so much understanding where the market is going that without that sort of multidisciplinary crew, you run the risk of a lot of things going wrong.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to the Uncut Design Podcast, where I speak with design leaders at Microsoft who are shaping the future of user experiences. In this series, we'll explore their unique approaches, lessons learned, and insights on driving impactful design in an ever-evolving industry. Today, my guest is Craig Fox, a Principal Design Director of Microsoft Azure IoT. In our conversation, we talk about what Craig looks for when building teams, how to navigate the ups and downs of a career in corporate, the secret to high-performing design teams, and so much more. Craig was my skip-level manager during my internship and has a wealth of knowledge on leading high-impact teams at Microsoft. Craig is well known across the organization for his rich knowledge of business and passion for design, which has had a direct impact on the managers and individual contributors on his team. His approachable leadership style and genuine commitment to mentorship have inspired countless colleagues to grow, innovate, and bring their best selves to work every day. With that, I bring you Craig Fox. And for today's episode, it's going to be kind of on building high impact teams. And I know that you've had a lot of experience in that space. So really interested to kind of pick your brain surrounding that. But just for starters, I want to know if we could kind of share like a bit of your origin story and kind of what got you interested in design and how that ultimately led to you joining Microsoft.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Thomas. I think my origin story is, I started programming around 11 years old. Really, when I look back, because I'm getting old now, when I look back, it was a teacher. A teacher changed my life in that they brought these Apple IIs into the classroom and they started to have us, do Logo, which was this little programming language that you drew pictures with. And that led me to just, a lifelong like learning and love of it right from age 11 on. I just was hooked and running, using it every lunch hour, going after school and just really into it. And that led me to, I guess focusing in on those kind of things, being in the after school computer club at these times. This was in Canada where I grew up, and just getting very, very interested, collecting friends, Gavin, Tim, Jan, that were interested in just, developing our own software. At this point, it was video games. We were trying to make our own video games through most of high school. I then went into computer science, which seemed the obvious choice. It wasn't as obvious then as it is now, which is to say at the time, the industry was still getting going. And so it wasn't so obvious that that's what you should do. It was more like this was what I was passionate about and what I liked. Um, I would say a little twist right out of the gate there was that I ended up going to Carleton University in Ottawa, which is Canada's capital. And all of the interest, all of the focus was on, government systems and databases and a lot of things that had nothing to do with my interests and my friends' interests, which was around gaming. So that was a real shocker. And unfortunately, the industry was so early on that talking to my professors about it, I was told this is not real programming, this is not real computer science. There's a real lack of understanding. Um, Luckily for me, the internet exploded around 1994, 95, and I started a company called Jump Design, basically making websites for companies. And then as uh, I don't know what that means for you in terms of reference, but at this time things are going crazy. People are just developing websites. And so I end up getting in with an advertising agency called Suburbia Studios that is trying to, sort of grow their business from traditional, radio, TV, print into interactive media and multimedia and websites. And this sets off the kind of wild 90s of CD-ROMs and websites and just, doing using Macromedia Director and then eventually Flash, and just developing a lot of rich multimedia, which was very, very important to me. The combination of all of the photo and video and music and all of these things getting combined into one was really what I was passionate about. Um, Somewhere along that line, I realized all sorts of things. I realized that the graphic designers and art directors at the agency had just incredible visual design skills and incredible brainstorming abilities. And so as I started to work in these groups with folks, I started to uh, study and adapt and watch and copy all of their different abilities, kind of chameleonish in terms of sucking up the different abilities of the different people and trying to sort of add those into my technical knowledge. And so out of that, I started a company, which is how I ended up coming to the United States. Actually, I started a photo and video sharing company in early 2000 called Neptune Media Share with a guy, James, out of Texas. And we ran that company for about 4.5 years. We did the whole venture capital funding tours down into California and in Washington. Of course, a lot of Microsoft folks, and then out to the Washington, D.C., and did that whole tour, eventually raising about 3.75 million in capital, and ran that company. That was an amazing experience, which our not first customer, but obviously most important customer was Microsoft. Microsoft at the time had a program called Movie Maker, and we had a service that allowed you to upload your photos and videos into that service. And so this was in the early 2000s when, rich internet applications and web services and things like this were just forming. This is 2 years before YouTube. And so that was when I became aware of Microsoft. We had a few meetings at Microsoft, and I realized that we were 14 people in Kirkland, and they were a machine. There was more people in the meeting than were in our whole company. And it very much tweaked my interest, kind of like you and I were talking before we got started, which is I was like, what is this place? I know it sounds funny because I've been here so long now, but what is this place that has such deep resources and so many people and so many technical people? And anyway, it kind of got me very excited. So when Neptune eventually petered out, I found my way to Microsoft. And at that time, we were called product designers when you came into the company, and that was very aligned to my view of what we do when things are going well. So that's a long version of the origin story, um, but I think it's helpful for everything else we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that's so great to hear. I love that story, and you had such a wide breadth of different experiences, and hearing from how kind of you got started in this whole space. I think with Apple too. I don't remember which Apple computer it is, but I believe in high school, like my freshman year, my science teacher had the graphical user interface.
Yeah.
So I think it's the Lisa, maybe.
Oh, maybe
Um,
Lisa, the original Mac, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but one of those, and it's just so fascinating to look at, and like I can imagine, like back then, if I was a kid, like how addicted I'd be.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
it's so nice to hear.
It was mind blowing at the time. Mind blowing. The Mac was really expensive, so we would go down and we would just stare at it in at the store, and it was pretty amazing. But then we got them in the schools and everything. So yeah, I think yeah. Anyway, so that's the thing, and I think I have never stopped finding it all fascinating. Yeah.
I'm curious, what would you say is something about design that's clear to you, but you don't think is quite as clear to others?
Well, certainly in the role I'm in now and have been for maybe a decade at the company, going from sort of IC into building teams and leading teams and now leading larger teams. I think the toughest thing is that research and design can really save the company money, right? It saves the company money, um, and delivers great products at the same time. I mean, what an amazing combo, right? Now obviously I'm a disciple, I'm a believer, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, however you want to put it. But wherever we're kind of helping figure out the customer problems early, and then whenever we're mocking up and trying to work out the experience early, we are saving so much time and effort and iteration and mistakes. And this is something that I've kind of tried to dedicate many years of my life to, but it's something that designers nod to, but other folks don't necessarily.
Mhm. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Yeah, I think that's so invaluable. Like the value that we get in just having, these low fidelity mock-ups and just the cost. It's just so easy to kind of go design a vision and not have
Yeah.
to wait on engineering and all the traditional steps. But
Actually, I have to say, because you just did your presentation yesterday, you demonstrated kind of, I would call it a good amount of the toolbox, right? You had your research, you had your lo-fi mock-ups, you had your check-in with your customers, you had all these things. And these are things that sort of are known, but are not necessarily practiced as the organization scales, right?
mm,
And so it's the scaling, and of course at Microsoft and the big tech five, it's the size of the organizations and whether or not they're actually following these sort of well-known processes and practices, or whether they stray off for various reasons, right? And I think that's kind of you can do it as one or three or five, but when it's 500 or 5,000, things seem to fall apart a bit.
yeah, that's definitely interesting. For I can imagine how much more difficult it would be with the 5,000 or 10,000 people teams.
Yeah.
What would you say is like one of your leadership decisions that you've made that's fundamentally kind of changed how your teams approach design?
Well, I don't know if it's a decision I made. I think it's about supporting what we're talking about. It's about trying to get the teams to increase the UX maturity of any of the organizations they're interacting with, right? So, without being specific, I guess, because I think this is going to go external. As we interact with engineering teams and we try to make sure that we are doing that generative research, that we are getting involved in the pre-planning, the planning, the mocking up of the possible experiences. These things are always going to benefit the organization, and they're also what the designers and researchers from early in career, through to senior levels are craving because they want to, just as you just recently did, they want to show their wares, they want to show the things that they can do, they want to show that value. And so I think those two things actually work really well together. What's great for the company, if it's also great for the individuals in terms of them expressing their discipline, then that's a wonderful combination, right? And so the more that we support that, or the more I can support that, then the happier, I am, and ultimately I think the more successful and impactful we are, which I think that's in the end when you're looking at things, to get too jump right into it here. But in the end, when you're thinking about what it is that this investment in headcount inside a research and design team is delivering to the organization, you want to be able to turn back and say, like, listen, it is our understanding of the customer pain points. It is the things that we are able to mock up and show and save, like we were talking about, engineers spending entire semesters going in the wrong direction, and then finding out from customer feedback later that that's not something that was desirable or needed or worked in the way that they were expecting.
I definitely agree. I think it's super important as well to have engineers involved in that process very early on. And I think something that we kind of overlook sometimes or try to, place a lot of emphasis on the handoff process. It's much, I think it's, at least that's my philosophy, is it's like, let's all kind of get our hands dirty together, and starts to kind of shift the way everybody thinks about problems. And that's
Absolutely, Thomas. Yeah, I think I don't know if you're bringing it up specifically, which is that I'll say it two ways. One is that it has to be that multidisciplinary team, not just research and design, but PM and engineering and business leaders, marketing, all those folks working together to facilitate that solution is critical, especially in a large corporation like Microsoft. The other thing, and I don't know if you meant it this way, is that there is sometimes what I would call the R&D delusion that we can do it ourselves. That gosh, why are these other folks, slowing us down if they would just listen to us? But I think that what I've learned over the decades now is that that's also foolhardy, in that there's so much technical depth, there's so much business understanding, there's so much understanding where the market is going, that without that sort of multidisciplinary crew, you run the risk of a lot of things going wrong.
a great point. And yeah, you definitely have a lot of experience kind of building these high performing teams. So I'm curious, what would you say are like the key principles you tend to focus on when building a design team, and how do you kind of ensure that those principles are sustained over time?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, when you're building research and design teams, so like for example, the automotive team. So we had an in-vehicle infotainment team that was, started, from one or two folks, grew up to around 25 folks. When you're building a team like that, you have to start with, I don't know if I've told you this already, you can roll your eyes, but this sort of ensemble casting approach, right? So within your own team, you have to say to yourself, okay, what are we doing out of the gate? Well, we're probably doing some storytelling. We're trying to get the executives to understand what it is about the experience that we need. So we're going to need research, and we're going to need storytelling. We need visual designers and storyboard artists and people like that, so that we can basically tell a compelling story. Then we're going to need interaction designers. And as you hire each of these people into the team, you have to look at their strengths, and you have to, like, cast them like literally like, the cast of Star Wars, right? You've got to figure out who it is that's all going to work well together. And then you sort of form sort of an 8-person kind of group that can really create something kind of valuable. And then as you have more features, like, oh, I also have I'm going to have a music aspect of it, a navigation aspect of it. I'm going to have an overall shell. You end up scaling out those teams, right? And so it is that ensemble casting and then amplifying it out. And then, of course, you have to get management that's going to work together, cross collaborate, and communicate well, and have kind of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts kind of attitude, right? And if you can, and I have many times, you put all those people in one room and you get them all very excited, and it's the best way to really crank out software. And so that's been a method that I think not just I but others have found to be successful. And I think that's ends up allowing those people to learn from each other, but also sort of amplify each other's strengths.
Wonderful response. And I've definitely been a witness to that, I think, within my team. Just like the blend of like skills and how well everybody complements each other and play to strengths and weaknesses. It's just like, yeah, you can tell it's like very meticulously kind of crafted team. It just works so well together. And I'm sure that's, kind of across all the teams that you manage, it's a consistent theme. But I'm curious, is there like, I'm sure it depends, definitely depends on the context of kind of the problem space and the project area. But I'm curious, are there like these consistent traits that you kind of look for in potential team members, and kind of how do you identify those like strengths?
Well, I think at Microsoft, we're looking for people that are going to sort of, be part of our values system, and they're going to, have this passion for technology. They're going to have this desire to, collaborate. They're going to be action oriented, right? They're going to want to come out and actually make things, build things, mock things up. So you're looking for that. Now that's not too hard to find in designers, you know what I mean? And it's not too hard to find researchers that are really curious about customers and really interested in their issues. But you are certainly separating out those folks from folks that are not that. And if they are not that, then you know this yourself already, then they're not going to enjoy this. They're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to succeed in it if they don't have that passion and that interest for customers and that passion for technology and that desire to make things right. And I think those are key fundamentals. The skills, like particular software, particular languages, the particular, processes. I mean, I have seen it change so much over my career that really it's just this desire to continue to learn and continue to take on the newest things, and that will take you a long, long way, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that um, I don't even want to bridge into it, but here we are with AI, and so now it's sort of turning a lot of the things on its head in terms of, maybe I feel like advice that I would have given last year or 2 years ago, so I don't really, I haven't quite formed what the proper advice out of that is. But certainly, I would say, you have to be continually learning the latest tooling and processes and really, I think there's a big component. I talk about this with the managers quite a bit when you talk about success. Um, Very quickly, you realize that the actual design skills or the research skills, they have to be there. You have to have those abilities. But it's actually that relationship with their feature crew and figuring out how to have impact with them that really makes the biggest difference to not only your happiness, doing your work, but your effectiveness, right? That a great mock-up will not save the day if it's not presented to the right people in the right context and you haven't, been able to either whatever your influencing strategy is, if you haven't been able to execute on that influencing strategy. And I think that's a little different than we have a tendency to believe out of school, that, kind of the great design myth, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. That some particular, that the sun will shine and everything will rally because of this great mock-up. And it's like, no, it's not nearly that simple.
Yeah, no, I think you hit so many great points there. It's definitely, I think key takeaways is like you have to kind of have a level of proactivity and just wanting to learn and adapting, I think, more so to the new changes in technology. But there's definitely like this common denominator of kind of having that core ability to communicate your design decisions and your rationale and do it very collaboratively, cross-functionally. So yeah, I think those are all great points.
Yeah, I'll tell you a personal story. So when I was working on the HoloLens team, we were responsible for the shell interaction and input. And my partner at the time, well, the dev partner and a PM partner. The PM partner, I won't say his name, but was a state debate champion. He had an incredible ability to speak in public and speak in groups. And so we would arm him with the information, with the mock-ups, with the things, and he would then present to the executives. He just had that incredibly convincing and powerful way of putting forward the ideas. And this is using your strengths of your group and saying, we may have the mock-up abilities, we may have the storytelling abilities, but then let's make sure that he's the one that presents this to the executives because he's just got that compelling ability to sell that story through, right? And setting your own ego aside or the organization's ego aside and saying like, this is the way to be the most effective.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's that, yeah, playing to each other's strengths and weaknesses for sure, which
Yeah,
kind of that's how it's a team game at the end of the day, and that's the best way to play it. So,
absolutely.
Um, yeah, when you've faced kind of like setbacks or project cancellations or like reorgs, what strategies do you use to keep your team motivated and focused on the long-term vision?
Well, it's hard to reorgs are so much a part of big tech, and they're so much a part of the experience that you have to very quickly realize that the reorganization is very, very, very rarely, almost never has anything to do with you. It's about them aligning the business at a high level to accomplish the goals and moving large parts of the organization around. So then if you say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to be in a shifting sea um, as part of this role, as part of this job, as part of this industry. So this is where, in skip levels, I'm often talking to people about you have to love your design practice, right? You have to feel like you're doing the right activities and working with your feature crews and things in a way that, meets your own bar for what you believe should be being done. If not, you should be, fighting your way to get to that point, influencing your way, if that's the wrong word. And I think then when the reorgs happen, you realize that it's just like, okay, well, the tectonic plates are shifting, but I'm happy with the work that I am doing. Now I'll talk about a few more specific things. When you I have worked entire year and a half on projects that never saw the light of day. The team was passionate about them. They were excited about them. We did everything you can imagine, the vision videos, the mock-ups, the workflows, and then they never, appeared. And so that's where you have to say to yourself, but did we engage in good work? Did we work well with our partners? Did we, basically do what we are paid to do, which is to make these possible, outcomes, to make these possible product ideas. And it is the business that then says, that's not viable, or the market has changed, or this is not what's going to be needed. And you just have to realize that's part of being, you're in the sausage making, as they always say, right? You're right there on the factory, you're right there involved. And so no one knows that we never decided to put out that particular brand of whatever, right? And I think that is just getting in the mindset that your role is in the making, and that things are going to get cut, things are going to happen, um, that the people will often remain. You'll move together, or you'll come back together at a later time, or there's sort of a community that comes back together. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Like I don't, I have had some big disappointments where things have got killed off. Um, but as time went on, I realized, well, yeah, but what a great experience it was just doing that work.
Yeah. No, that's a great anecdote. I think it definitely because those skills are translatable at the end of the day, and you could have been much more efficient in the way you collaborated and kind of tried to execute than a team who's constantly shipping. But it's at the end of the day those translatable skills that you'll take away. But I think especially for early in career folks, it can be much more difficult, at least in the moment.
Yeah,
Like reflecting back, it's
yeah.
probably easier to identify that. So I'm curious, like, how did you personally maintain your momentum and stay kind of resilient when your career path took these unexpected turns?
Well, the first thing I want to say there about career is, and I don't know if this will land, but in my 20s, I thought careers just go up. You start a little company, then you go into an agency, you become the director, then you become a founder, and then you get into Microsoft, and then and it turns out that careers go up and down, and then back up and down, and then back up and down, and it's not quite as straight a line. I guess it is for some, but for most, it's a little bit more of a journey. Um, I can name a few folks where I guess it did just go straight up. But for the rest of us, it goes up and down and back up again if you're lucky, and back down and back up again. And so just realizing that in each of those experiences, you're probably learning something. There's pros and cons, like actually going up and becoming people are, they want to become a manager, right? The thing is, almost all of us got into this because we like to make things. I spent all that time in my room making my own video games. It wasn't because I wanted to be a manager. It was because I wanted to make video games. And so it's one of those things where when you become a manager and you realize like, okay, now it's some administrative and some business and some time is getting taken off of me and I'm getting like my time is getting fragmented. Then you go back to being an IC. You say, oh, this is great. I'm focused on my work again. Then you go up to being a manager of managers and you think, oh my gosh, now we're just trying to get everybody rowing in the same direction. And we're trying to make sure that the budgets and administration and so forth. And then you go back to being a manager, say, well, this isn't so bad. At least I'm focused on one particular area and I've got all the people focused on one particular area. So I'm just saying each of the experiences can have a value and an interest, right? And as you go up and down that chain, you have to try to enjoy the positive aspects of any particular thing. If you're an IC and you're early in career and you're thinking to yourself, what do I need to do to get ahead, which is what everybody's thinking, then it is about growing out your skill set. It is making sure that you are, it's T-shaped, right? That you are learning many things and then also becoming specialist in something, particularly of that whatever org you're in at the time, right? As you move around the corporation, which many of us do, you take your generalist design skills and practices, and then you also add in that sort of product knowledge and depth on whatever is needed in the particular area that you've transferred into, right? And that is going to be your recipe for success inside that organization, right? You have to have some subject matter expertise, and then you also have to bring your generalist understanding of the different design practices and tooling and deliverables.
Yeah. Oh, I love that response. It's definitely a lot of ups and downs, and I think, especially for early in career folks, it's much better to identify that that's kind of what you should expect moving forward, rather than be surprised by it. And yeah, I think that it definitely resonates a lot. I think your advice is great. Do you have like any additional advice for people who are just feeling early in career, or feeling kind of upset, or just kind of down that their progress is stalled and projects aren't really moving the way that they like?
Well, yeah, two pieces of advice. One, it's funny, I've given this advice before, and then I've had a person come back and say, oh, when you first told me this, I did not like it, and now I get it. And the first piece of advice is that careers are long. So you don't want to panic. You want to trust yourself. You want to build your skills. You want to keep trying to work through, like I was talking about, with your different experiences. And the careers is long, of course, is just hard to hear, right? At the time when you're early in career and you're just like, you got that, I don't know, new vampire blood, right? You're just like really wanting to like get things happening and you got a lot of power, a lot of energy, a lot of things. And so don't panic, right? Just believe in yourself, believe in learning things and working and I think the other thing is that you know, I don't there's no special formula. You know what I mean? Like you have to adapt to the organization, to the industry, to the state of the industry that you're in at the time, and things will change. Like obviously, sometimes teams are growing fast, sometimes teams are slow. And that you want to make your way out. You want to design your way out. You want to research your way out. That the best thing to do is to jump into a hackathon, is to go do a side project that you're interested in, and if you can align I think you and I were talking about this, if you can align your side project to a Microsoft, in our case, goal, that's the best thing you could possibly do. You start working on whatever AI related ideas and mock-ups and potential applications and this kind of stuff, that is going to pay dividends, right? That is going to be good for you, good for the company, good for your career, right? It's one of these things where you can always make your way out by just taking a time where a project gets killed or things are taking too long and you feel like you have time on your hands. Well, just go turn around and put that time and energy into something you're passionate about. And that early in career will will pay off.
That's great advice, and I love that. You manage multiple research and design teams that we've talked about, but I'm curious, since these teams are kind of focused on very different problem spaces and areas, how do you keep all of them aligned while still giving the design managers enough freedom to kind of lead and innovate?
Yeah. Well, at this juncture, at this point, yes, you have to trust, the managers that are engaging in the individual teams with their engineering counterparts. You have to give them uh, the trust that they are, making the right decisions, that they are pushing forward in the right aspects, aligning to the business priorities with the teams. You have to really um, give them as much room as they can to make their own decisions and move forward and be effective, right? You know this working with Stella, right? She's making decisions hour by hour, right? So there's no way, no reasonable way, and it would be a bad idea to be trying to track her through in her entire day of decision making, right? So you're working with your management team to make sure that you're aligned, first of all, on people and how we care for people, what we how we want to grow people, career management. You're making sure that they have their the things that they need in terms of, of course, tooling and support. And then you want to, just be uh, keeping each of the teams sort of, sharing out with each other and with me, of course, kind of what their goals are and making sure we are aligned with those goals, making sure those goals are aligned, to my manager and what he's trying to accomplish overall for the organization, right? So it's just keeping those alignments together that's very important. Yeah. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely. I think trust is a huge part of it. And even, today's like bi-weekly share out we had, there's like so much stuff going on. And
Yes.
I just
We
yeah,
we made a list the other day of all of the projects, and of course it is many, many, many projects.
mhm,
So
yeah,
the idea that you know that I would go through every single project in detail, say every week or something, is just no longer viable, right? The five team leaders, are keeping track of the details inside each team.
What is your approach to kind of mentoring your managers so they can grow as leaders while keeping their team successful?
The first is just uh, kind of one-on-one coaching, and then coaching in the moment, right? Coaching in a design review or something that's happening, kind of whether that's on the side or in the one-on-one. There are each of the managers is at different states of their own careers and their different management experience. So you want to be hopefully I'm modeling that, and they can observe what I'm doing in various meetings and avenues and in our own managers meeting. But then you're also just giving them that coaching when you see uh, something that's worth commenting on, whether it's a people, product, or process issue, right? And that being as timely as you can with that, and as kind as you can with that. And then also understanding that, almost everybody, the managers, the ICs, everybody's under a lot of pressure all the time. And so you're trying to judge um, in the moment kind of what's the appropriate amount of guidance to give and in what style, right? Depending on what's happening. Yeah. Um, it's often, the most challenging aspects are when people aren't seeing eye to eye, or they're have different strong passionate views on what should be done, and they can't get together on a consensus or something. I guess what I mean to say is that a company of our size and with our resources, we can solve just about anything technical or design wise. So it's about getting the people to get onto the same page and get them to an agreement and get them moving forward in a positive and with momentum towards something that's the real challenge.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you hit a very great point there. With, a company this large, it's kind of bound to happen that people have kind of conflicting approaches or thoughts surrounding a particular approach to solve a problem. So, how do you kind of manage that conflict whenever it comes up?
Well, you've got to work towards, I'm trying to remember now, the book. Uh, it's a book about Pixar from, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. And one of the things that was amazing about this book that just went into my brain and I just loved was this idea about how all of the directors would get together and they would have extremely candid conversations about the films that they were making. There was sort of a no holds barred aspect in terms of making sure that things that need to be said get said. And I think that this is a very important part of, bringing your management team together and making sure that we are being candid, that we are discussing the elephants in the room, that we are getting, down to the real things that need to be worked out. I would say that this has become a little harder in a hybrid and remote environment. It's a little bit easier when you're sitting in a room together to really get that body language and that sentiment and that expression and all those sort of micro cues to make sure that everybody is getting on the same page. But we're working it through. We're all getting better at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're doing an amazing job. um, what would you say is one lesson you've learned about kind of scaling design and being in a leadership position, and how has that kind of shaped your leadership moving forward?
Well, in terms of scaling, you have to scale appropriately. Um, you definitely don't want to overhire, to be like super candid. You don't want to overhire. You want to build out those teams like we were talking 10 minutes ago to complement each other, to focus on the problem, to see something missing and go add to it in a very careful manner, right? There are which is to say different than a startup mentality, right? Where a startup, especially big, want to say Silicon Valley startups where they just are hiring and hiring and hiring and then figuring it out. That is a model. And there's probably people who speak intelligently about that model. I have always, for pros and cons, been of the model of how do we grow the team, more thoughtfully, more organically, and make sure that it's set together so that there isn't really a situation where we find ourselves saying, oh, what are we going to have these people do? And generally, we have the opposite, right? I right now have a list of 13 people that I could use if I could get the heads, right?
Hmm. How would you say that you foster kind of this cross-team collaboration when teams are kind of focused on different goals or timelines?
Well, there's two ways. The first way is that by the very nature of research and design organizations at the company, if you look at us, we work across so many features, so many products and services, and we are often trying to tell these all up stories that go across end to end across those products and services. And we have the skills and to visualize it, tell the story, and get it in front of the executives and the folks that need to see it. So that is as you know, is a common value that we bring to the organization. But in itself, it ends up bringing up and highlighting any of the things that might have been misunderstood by these different parts of the engineering organization that are by their very nature having to get laser focused on a particular solution, right? And so it's kind of like our very being, our way of working is also the solution to keeping everybody communicating. And so you've got to avoid being a research and design organization that only does what it's told.
Hmm.
which would be sort of delivering specifically what they think they need inside of each organization. You want to do that, and then you also want to show how does that then function across all of the other parts of the story end to end. And then this will allow the leaders of those particular services to understand, like, oh, wait a minute here, there's a challenge as I go across these things. And they're not all flowing well, and we're going to lose customers, we're going to confuse users, and we're going to ultimately not allow people to deploy a solution because these services are just not going to work well together. So it's kind of like I said very at the beginning, I drink the Kool-Aid, I'm a believer, but I believe what we do inherently allows that communication to occur. Now, of course, as you know, you've been here for the summer, you know that it takes a bit more than that. You got to then try to get the right people in the room and then show them in a very specific manner and then sort of, cause it to go. But one of the things that's great about this company is then once it's recognized, then it's acted upon.
Yeah. No, I think that's one thing we do like very well within this team and all the teams that you manage is really crafting those narratives. And I think that in some of the projects that are still in progress, I've observed as well as ones that have kind of been wrapping up. There's this core kind of focus on the user and how really we're jumping in and solving that problem, which I think we do great. But I'm curious, how do you kind of strike a balance between encouraging kind of bold, innovative design decisions versus kind of maintaining that consistency across these multiple teams?
Well, I don't think those are at odds. Like you want each of the teams to, there should be a portion of experimentation and sort of out of the box thinking and futuristic looking happening inside each team that's engaging with their engineering team. And then they should be trying to time that, as well as they can to the planning process, right? It's very interesting to do. I've led teams that did nothing but envisioning, and when you're doing that envisioning, if you don't get the envisioning exactly lined up to when the engineering team is coming on board looking for what it is we should go forward and make, but instead do it 2 months, 3 months later, you're not going to have a receptive audience. They've already tooled up, they've already got the hundreds of people going in a direction. It's too late to come in and say, hey, what happened to the North Star we did 3 months ago? So there's like a doing the right work at the right time and getting it in front of the right people, like just that is critical. But so therefore you have to put it down into each of the particular teams to make sure they're aligning with their particular engineering organization.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's so important to work and communicate consistently with the engineering team and really make sure that you guys can operate like hand in hand, stride in stride. Because I think I mentioned this, I believe, in a prior episode, but like as a designers, our job is really to view things kind of through the possibility lens, whereas
Yes.
engineers are
Yes.
kind of that probability and can we actually do this and how might we go about it? So it's super important we work together.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I love that. Yes, I 100% agree on the possibilities lens being in the context of this conversation a key component of what we can deliver, right? We also want to be able to come through and get right down to the most efficient workflow and the greatest alignment and fit and finish and things like that. So we also want to be great finishers, right? But I think a lot of our value needs to be in that sort of starting and visioning aspect as well.
Yeah, especially I think within cloud computing and the space that we're in, the AI kind of boom that's happened.
Yes.
Things are very like rapidly changing and moving around. So how do you ensure that the design vision is staying aligned across these teams with kind of the rapidly changing landscape?
Well, I think when you're saying design vision, I think well, I'll interpret it two ways. One is we want to have we want to help express the overall product and business direction, right? Using our skill sets, right? So that is about making sure that we are helping clearly communicate what the really what in this company what the executives are viewing as the direction for say edge computing, from Satya on down. How do we sort of support that vision by clarifying it and making sure that people understand it and that that is shared across the organization? I think that's something that we are very good at. As for the design teams themselves, I think the design teams, as we were discussing earlier, if each of the teams really within, Carrie's team all the way across are trying to bring this high value research and design, but aligned to the business priorities, right? So this is like, um, does that make sense? Talking about the difference between the product vision and sort of the in our particular case, we would have a goal for our operational, technology folks to experience things in a certain way, our IT folks to experience things in a certain way, the data experience people to experience things a different way, our internal developers. And those are probably our expressions of our design. But in terms of how we support the vision of the organization, it's in kind of the clarifying of that through the end to ends and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that response. That's you guys definitely do a great job of. I think it can be complex, like kind of making sure that the vision trickles down properly from the different levels of leadership, and is kind of interpreted as intended by all the different ICs. But I think it's you guys do a great job of that.
Yeah, I'll give you a very specific example. I think of where you're going for. So in something like the automotive team, we're focused on one particular product, right? The in-vehicle infotainment system. And so we were able to bring down the vision to, the goal is eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, mind on the drive. Okay? Could get into that a lot, but I'm just going to leave it. And that was after a lot of research, a lot of thinking about what's really important about those systems. But that is a product vision as opposed to what we are discussing here, which is an organization of many products. And that's why I'm saying we can't discuss the individual service visions, right? We would have many versus the
Mhm.
business vision, which we can help express, something like
Yeah,
edge computing. Yeah. I know that's
that's
nuanced. And for people who are listening, who are not in a big tech company, they're gonna be like, what in the hell? But yes, yeah.
yeah. No, I definitely think it makes more sense after being here for a summer. Definitely be a
Yes,
bit
yes.
confused if I was
It
still
could
in
be,
university,
you're
but
just like, what's going on? Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Great. Well, I think we only have a few minutes left, so I kind of wanted to transition to the lightning round, which is just
Sure.
kind of rapid fire questions. So yeah, feel free to take as much time as you'd like answering each. But yeah, for starters, do you have a favorite book that you recommend others read?
Well, I think that the life-changing book was, Donald Norman's the Design of Everyday Things. This was,
Mhm.
I had an industrial designer, a great friend. I was in comp sci and he was in industrial design. And I think at the time, this is a long time ago, he was like, what in the hell? You guys don't think about any human factors or anything. Like, it's sort of a fair criticism. And he hands me this book. And of course, it just my mind explodes like reading this book, which then leads to reading all of his other stuff and Jakob Nielsen's stuff and going into seminars and tracking all those guys down and what you could do back then. And just becoming obsessed with that aspect of design and development. So yeah, that was a big changer. I think these days I'm a YouTube fanatic, right? So, you just have to be tracking down, every little video on whether it's just everything happening with various AI toolings or even just sort of business, understanding of what's happening in the markets or what's happening with the, just non-AI tools. That's just how I keep myself um, much to, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I do a lot of that. I just said
Yeah.
I was gonna make it. My wife will come in and be like, "What are you watching?" But it's like, this is amazing. It's 20 minutes on Unity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that as well. Don't worry. I'll get into these like rabbit holes on YouTube. I'm a big fan or an advocate of leveraging these algorithms to learn rather than
Yeah.
just you can get
Yeah,
into fall into a
because
lot
when you
of
go down a rabbit hole, then they feed you this other stuff that's very
yeah.
relevant to this
Hmm.
particular, deep dive that you're doing. Yes, it's great, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you love YouTube, but do you have a show or movie that you have fallen in love with recently?
Well, right now it's the new, what is it? The power of the Rings of Power, right? So I've been a Lord of the Rings fan forever. I like reading The Hobbit as a kid and playing D&D and all that stuff. So yeah, right now I just finished the second one season two, episode two of the Rings of Power last night, and um, I love that stuff. Yeah, and then if it's more of a design related thing, I often recommend to people, if you have Disney Plus, you have to watch their sort of a making of type stuff. And one of the best one is the thing about the Imagineers, all the way back to the early days of Disney. And when we talk about multidisciplinary teams and we talk about changing what is possible, got to what I see. I like the look on your face right now. Look up the Imagineers documentary. I think it's 5 or 6 hours. Speaking of geekdom, but it's amazing. It's amazing. Um, and in terms of just what, and I think what does that mean for today is a very I think interesting. But yeah, can't recommend that enough.
I'll definitely be checking that out. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for that
give it a love.
recommendation. And wanted to ask, what's a product that you recently discovered that has really impressed you? And this could be physical or a
Well,
mobile app, anything.
I don't know if it's recent. Well, actually, it's a great thing. So I'm a huge Sonos believer. I think Sonos industrial design. I think the way that they're, way they connect to the why I have, I think 9 Sonoses. Like and I use them for everything. And actually, an interesting story there, right, is that they had done this amazing job, and then they released an application about 2 months ago. They released their Sonos app, and it's been a disaster. So that's an example where I think I don't know what happened. I don't have any inside knowledge, but it's a good example where you have this like I don't know what to call it, like fan base, people who like Sonos love Sonos. And then they went and changed the app on us, and everyone is just at our, they're just losing their minds because they took away features that people liked and everything. So I guess a two-part story. One, I love Sonos, everything from the designs to how easy to get the devices on, to how well they work, to the industrial design, to the packaging, to the everything about them. And then, boy, oh boy, don't mess with your app. I don't know. They didn't do the right research and design, obviously. I don't know what happened there. Um, yeah,
Yeah, we gotta track down the designer that was behind that for sure.
they're probably gonna be like, thanks a lot, Craig. But yeah, yeah, it's really gone well.
Two last questions before we wrap up. I want to ask, is there like a piece of advice you wish you had received early in career, or conversely, like a really important or impactful piece of advice you received?
Well, we touched on it a little bit, which is that
Mhm.
you want to enjoy the practice, not the outcomes, right? Because it's long. Like I was saying, careers are long. You want to enjoy the people you work with. You want to enjoy the things that you're doing. You want to find excitement and value in those engagements, in those artifacts, in those things that you're making. And I think that in itself will take you a long way.
Yeah, big plus one to the people. I think that's the one thing that you'll look back and really be fond of those moments and those times with the people you worked
Yeah,
with. So
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
last,
I've been lucky enough that I've had folks on my teams that have now gone on to just giant, great, wonderful things, right? They come into the company, they're, junior folks, and now they go off into just big, exciting, wonderful opportunities. And that's very rewarding to know them from, when they first onboarded and then, the whatever, VP here and, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, love to hear that stuff. It's awesome. And a last question I have for you is where can people find you if they want to reach out and connect?
Well, I am pretty much on a social media fast these days. It turns out it's not that good for you. So, just look me up on LinkedIn, or Craig Fox at Microsoft.com, and reach out that way. I've had to abandon all those other things. It's just I think we're getting more and more evidence it's not too good for you.
I don't blame you. I'm on that path myself. But yeah, it's been great chatting with you. I know I'm keeping you a little long here, but I really appreciate it. It's been such an honor speaking with you, Craig. And yeah, love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. It was amazing having you this summer, and thanks for setting up this podcast.
Of course. Yeah, my pleasure. All right, take care.
You too.
Bye.
See you. Bye.